Thank you everybody for joining us today for our final hour block of our virtual HSS Symposium. Seeing lots of folks quickly come in. I love seeing the numbers go up in participants. Peter, I'm going to give you access to share your screen in just a moment. I just enabled that, and so we'll give you a moment to share your screen if you have a PowerPoint presentation, and we'll wait. Wow, I turned away and said that, and 10 more people joined your presentation, Peter. So super excited for that. And when you're ready, Peter, we'll begin. As a reminder to folks who are just joining us right now, if you haven't been at the symposium yet, you'll know that there's a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. So while Peter's presenting and any other presenters presenting during this hour block, you can submit your questions, your comments, etc. on that, and we'll be able to address as many as we can. So thank you so much. And Peter, you are on.
Okay. All right. I'll share my screen. All right, so sure. All right, so hello everyone. My name is Peter, and hope you all are doing well and staying healthy, both physically and mentally during this pandemic. So today I'm going to be presenting my research on the theories of suicide in evolutionary psychology. If anyone has any burning questions, like Connie said, you can ask the questions in the Q&A box and I'll try to address them as quickly as possible. Yeah, so first, starting off, there are three models describing suicidal behavior in evolutionary psychology: the inclusive fitness model, the bargaining model, and the costly apology model. So we'll do a quick overview of these models. First, the inclusive fitness model explains that suicidal behavior is due to low reproductive potential and cost to kin. So basically, the actor views themselves as a burden and that their kin would have a greater chance of survival with the individual gone. The goal of this type of suicide is death. So essentially, it's an altruistic sacrifice to relieve kin of their burden. And this model suggests that suicide should be associated with age and perceived burdensomeness, with perceived burdensomeness and age having a correlation with one another as well. While there's little research specifically testing this model, background research on elderly and burdensomeness do support the data. And let me quickly apologize for my lighting. It's not the greatest. I'm stuck in my room, so sorry about that. Anyway, so next, the bargaining model posits that suicidal behavior is due to a need for social support. The actor is in an undesirable social situation where they feel powerless to relieve themselves of that situation. Furthermore, they feel that their social worth is incorrectly evaluated by their social partner. So basically, they feel like they deserve better than they actually are treated. The goal of this type of suicide is to gain power, control, and attention from social partners. So essentially by incurring costs to gain social support. This assumes that the individual has value to others, whether it's through their work and production or through their inherent value in themselves. Essentially, this model describes suicide attempts as a bargain or as a cry for help. This model suggests that suicidal behavior should be associated with lack of social support and thwarted belongingness, and has been directly tested as well as is supported by various background information and research on the protective value of social support. So the last model that we will be discussing today, or that I will be discussing today, is the costly apology model, which suggests that suicidal behavior is due to a severe transgression or wrong against a social partner. Essentially, when someone wrongs a social partner, their suicidal behavior serves as a costly and honest apology to restore that social relationship. So this suggests that suicide should be associated with guilt and acknowledgement of wrong, as well as self-blame. So as this model is relatively new, being introduced in late 2018, it has not been directly tested, but research on self-blame and guilt has shown to have a connection to suicidal behavior. For the bargaining model, is their goal not to successfully commit suicide? Yes, their goal is not to have a successful suicide, is to gain social support And that is also similar to the costly apology model. All right, so moving on. So here's a quick recap. The inclusive fitness model suggests that suicide is caused by low reproductive value to kin, and the goal is death to relieve kin of burden. The bargaining model states that suicidal behavior is due to the actor's social worth being incorrectly evaluated, and the goal is not death, but to elicit a reevaluation and improve social support. Lastly, the costly apology model claims that suicidal behavior roots from serious transgressions against a valued social partner, with the act as a costly apology in order to restore the relationship. And once again, this model, the actual goal of suicide is not death. So for the current study, we will be testing the predictive ability of these three models, investigating untested factors related to the bargaining model specifically, and distinguishing the models under different circumstances. And I will explain my hypotheses that have to do with these three objectives. So first, the first hypothesis having to do with testing the models is that emotional support, burdensomeness, and recent transgressions will each uniquely predict suicide ideation, testing each of the three models. Specifically for the bargaining model, emotional support should mediate the effect of physical presence on suicide, and distinguishing the models under different conditions, age will moderate the effect of emotional support and burdensomeness on suicide ideation, with emotional support decreasing in predictive power with age, while burdensomeness increases in predictive power with age. All right, so for our methods, we recruited participants through 3 different age groups through various means such as social media and classroom advertisement. We use various validated scales to measure emotional support, burdensomeness, depression, and suicide ideation, while using single item questions to measure physical presence and severe transgression. And all of this was administered online through Qualtrics. All right, so for the results, I will be showing you some results on the 18 to 30 age group, as data collection for the 2 older age groups are still underway. Thus, we will only be addressing the first 2 hypotheses without addressing the age moderation. So the simple correlations of emotional support, burdensomeness, and severe transgression with suicide ideation were all significant, supporting our first hypotheses, testing the models. And the graphs on the right display the correlations of burdensomeness, parental emotional support, and parental physical presence on suicide ideation. Furthermore, as physical presence has a strong correlation with emotional support, the graph at the bottom right also displays this relationship. And that will later be relevant for testing the mediation of physical presence and emotional support. So next, by performing a multiple regressions analysis, we tested the unique predictive ability of parental emotional support while controlling for burdensomeness. So we didn't control for severe transgressions because its effect was smaller than emotional support. And when I entered it into, when entering it into SPSS, it also did not produce a significant R-squared change after entering burdensomeness. So this graph shows that parental emotional support revealed a unique effect as the R-squared change was significant, as circled with red. And that to test the effect of physical presence, that the effect of physical presence was mediated by emotional support, we entered physical presence after emotional support and found no significant R-squared change. So as both physical presence and emotional support are negatively correlated with suicide ideation and strongly correlated with one another, saying that physical presence does not produce a significant change with emotional support and is already in the model, it suggests that the effect of physical presence on suicide ideation is mediated by emotional support. And this table shows the unique variance accounted for by each variable, with parental emotional support accounting for 12.4% of the change after removing the effect of burdensomeness, while parental physical presence only accounts for 0.2% of the change after removing the effect of burdensomeness and parental emotional support. So in conclusion, the data suggests that burdensomeness and parental emotional support can uniquely predict suicide ideation and supports the first two hypotheses. However, more data needs to be collected for the older groups in order to address the third hypothesis of age moderation. There are some generalizability limitations, and yeah, so some future directions include looking into the possible mechanisms that can lead to this mediation and looking into the actual age moderation, as well as testing these hypotheses based on suicide attempts instead of ideation. So yeah, hope you guys all enjoyed this talk, and thank you for listening in. Here's a quick reference for CAPS if you need any psychological services, and good luck on finals.
Thank you, Peter. And I appreciate you adding that CAPS information at the end for folks who may need that resource, because we have about 45 people join your presentation this afternoon. I will go to maybe a few Q&A questions. We have some kudos to you. Great job, Peter. Jasmine said, for the bargaining model, is their goal not to successfully commit suicide?
Yeah, it is not. Yeah.
So I'm going to repeat that again. So Jasmine asked, for the bargaining model, is their goal not to successfully commit suicide? Yeah, oh, sorry, I think you were breaking up a little. Can you repeat that one more time?
The answer is, yeah, it's not to successfully commit suicide. It's to bargain for social support, and it's an attempt is a cry for help. And that's similar to the costly apology model as well, where the goal for that model is not a successful suicide either. Sorry, were you able to get that?
Thank you for that clarification. So Rebecca said, great job, Peter. Oh yeah, we were able to get that one. Thank you. Okay. And Christopher said, great job, Peter. Anonymous, maybe the last question from an anonymous attendee. Do you think the populations tested displayed enough suicidal behavior that these results could be generalized?
That I'm not super certain of. The cutoff for suicide ideation on the scale, that I'm not super certain of, but it does show a strong enough correlation, a significant enough correlation that it should be able to be generalized to both regular or non-suicidal populations as well as depressed and suicidal populations.
So based on your findings, that's what was resolved, but generalization, maybe so, maybe not. That's maybe perhaps some more research to be conducted.
Yeah, a lot of research has been done on specifically depressed and suicidal populations. So, and on those populations, definitely social support does play a big role.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Peter. You're getting lots of kudos here in this Q&A. So great questions, great presentation, very helpful, very informative topic. So thank you so much. It is 4:15. So Peter, in just a moment, I'm going to put you back as an attendee and add our next presenter. So thank you all as we transition to our next presenter. Virtual round of applause for Peter. Thank you so much for educating us on this important topic.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Okay, Christina, I'm going to give you access to share your screen in just one moment. I just did that right now. So as you're getting set up, I will introduce you. So this is Christina Colias. They're a graduate student in the Department of English, and today they'll be talking about Shakespeare's treatment of love sickness. So Christina, when you're ready, the floor is yours. And as a reminder, you can add your questions and comments to the Q&A box in the middle of your screen. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Connie. Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Clias. I'm currently a second-year English MA student here at Cal State Fullerton, and just to kind of give you a little background as to what this project is about. So this project is my thesis for my department, and I've been working on it for the past year. So it's been a long, tedious process, but very, very fun to create. And just to kind of show you kind of my main motivation behind it, I've really gotten into researching the fields of psychology as well as women in gender studies. So that's kind of been my main avowed goal, was to create a project that was very much so interdisciplinary as I venture into my PhD program in the fall. So my paper title is called By My Troth I Am Sick, Typologies of Love Sickness in Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew, Much Ado About Nothing, and Troilus and Cressida. So basically, my paper uses John Allen Lee's The Color Wheel Theory of Love as a lens to analyze love sickness among the three couples in The Taming of the Shrew, Much Ado About Nothing, and Troilus and Cressida. The use of this theory leads to my diagnoses of The Taming of the Shrew's Kate and Petruchio as an Eros couple, Much Ado About Nothing's Beatrice and Benedict as a Storge couple, and Troilus and Cressida as a Ludos couple. In making sense of Shakespeare's profound exploration of these types of love, we then get a fuller view of his proto-feminist tendencies that align with his privileging of reciprocity in love. All right, so then basically Lee's theory compares love to hues of color, which I found to be very fascinating, and that many might question, though, why I am using a 1970s theory within the world of Shakespeare. And the reason I do is because through his works, Shakespeare shows his readers what it means to have productive relationships over ones that are toxic. And I think that Lee also follows that same thought process too, to show that love is more than just courtship. So Lee also further postulates that there are more than one ways to define love, and that it's not really a term that is quite simple to explain, because he says, like, if you think about it, there's more than one color. So that's why I thought that this theory was very pertinent to kind of looking at love as a psychological idea, as well as a women and gender studies lens too, to kind of look at the self-empowerment there. But basically for this project, I only focus on his primary category of love, which is Eros, Ludos, and Storge. So if you see on this chart here, red is Eros, and that symbolizes romance. At the very top, we have Ludos, that's blue, and that talks about conquest. And then here is Storge, which is yellow, and that talks about friendship. So these three are the primary. The one in the middle is secondary, and then these three are tertiary to kind of build on those two concepts. So basically in my thesis, I cement each couple within the context of Renaissance love sickness and Lee's model to show that each pair defines love differently, but all three bonds prove to be mutually beneficial through a means of reciprocity in love. Sorry. Wait, that was wrong. There we go. So basically, love sickness as a concept was viewed as a disease that goes back to the ancient Greeks, and that it's something that infects the head, hand, and heart. And that also ties into a recurrent body trope within the canon of Shakespeare, in that he says that the head is the mind, the heart is the soul, and the hand is the body. So juxtaposing the antiquity of love sickness with Lee's theory disheveled the archaic notion of love adhering to strict categories of gender, where the female is the damsel and the male is the hero. So Lee's theory and Shakespeare's feminist disposition shows love's connection to selfhood that stretch beyond the artificial confines of biological determinism. And then in my thesis, I kind of go through how love has been defined in the past. So I used works such as Plato's Symposium, Plato's Lysis, Freud's 3 essays on the theory of sexuality, Richard von Krafft-Ebing's Psychopathia Sexualis, John Lyly's Euphues' The Anatomy of Wit, as well as Sir Thomas Hobby's translation of the Courtier, to provide a scaffolding that defines love as a physical, mental, and a spiritual comprehension. So I found that it was very important to include this lit review because I wanted to show that this question of what is love is still a fruitful conversation that is still going on, and it's been going on since antiquity, and I wanted to add to the discourse myself as a future scholar in this field. All right, so then the message in the media. So past and present scholars alike still debate whether or not they think that Shakespeare was a proto-feminist. And my readings of these three plays aim to give Shakespeare the credit that I think he has so rightfully earned. And as Bell Hooks also wrote in one of her texts, Feminism is for Everybody, quote, without males as allies in struggle, feminist movement will not progress. So I think that that's very important to keep in mind when reading plays like these. So, and then after years of being slammed and damned, I think that Shakespeare is an ally to feminist education and an overall proto-feminist who has carefully sculpted his plays to adhere to one common principle of moral edification. And I think that Shakespeare saw it as his job and duty to kind of teach people out of their patriarchal attitudes by using self-awareness as a social corrective in that sense. All right. So then this is the crux of my paper, but for the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of gloss over them as well as I can to make sure that you guys are kind of on the same page as I am. But basically what I do is I analyze character rhetoric and character behavior throughout all of these three plays to offer a new way of reading each bond that we see happen. And with that being said, a lot of scholars do not like 2 out of these 3 plays, or rather the couples that stem from them. They really love Beatrice and Benedict and Much Ado About Nothing. They really think that they're the perfect match, but I do not think so, which I'll explain later. But with Taming of the Shrew, they really do see the whole play, as well as the bond of Kate and Petruchio, as being toxic and very much so promoting patriarchy, which I don't think that was Shakespeare's intention. And then also with Troilus and Cressida, a lot of scholars are quite sexist because they do label the female character kind of as being this promiscuous whore, whereas Troilus is kind of being seen as this courtly warrior, which again kind of is being anticlimactic when it comes to showing this damsel in distress narrative. But again, I don't think that was Shakespeare's feminist intentions. So we're gonna go on to the next slide. So basically, I argue that Kate and Petruchio from The Taming of the Shrew are an Eros couple, because I think that their love is verified on all 3 structures of the head, hand, and heart. And then what I also found to be quite fascinating is that Lee himself thought that Eros was the most superficial category out of the 3, but what he found is that it really does involve a deeper sense of permanence, and it's not just about sex and lust and such. And then I go on to Beatrice and Benedict from The Taming of the Shrew. And like I said before, a lot of scholars really do see them as being a perfect match. And even though it is a comedy and they really do have a lot of wit and banter going back and forth, and it is very entertaining, throughout the whole play, they both show acute symptoms of philophobia, which is the fear of love. And I do think that they are more friends that kind of conquer that fear together through them comically ending the play in marriage. So I think that their marriage is more of friendly recompense more than erotic love. And then lastly, with Troilus and Cressida, I look at them as being a relationship more that's bent on the physical aspects. So that's why I say that it's more about conquest. And I kind of explicate how the character of Cressida is the femme fatale trope, in that she's really sexually uninhibited, and she really does show a very inspiring and gallant practice of female sexuality. And then with Troilus, he also shows symptoms of what psychologists call erotomania, which is basically saying that that he's kind of pursuing a relationship that is just one-dimensional. So basically, after all that is said and done, even though I didn't have that much time to kind of wrap things up real bit, as in the end, I think that love kind of allows females and male figures to to see their true paths in life, whether that be single or with a significant other. And I don't think that couples technically fail at love, but what I think Shakespeare's feminist intuition shows us is that there is a lot of reciprocity with love, and that in the end, happiness and love is kind of knowing your own kind of loving. Is it about romance, about conquest, about friendship, or is it something else? So as I hope to have established by now, what these three fictional couples, Lee and the bard himself, all seek to teach us is that love can be many things, but is certainly not monotypic. Thank you.
Thank you, Christina. We appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
As a reminder, you can submit comments or questions in the Q&A box listed in the bottom and middle of your screen. So we'll start off with the first comment, but please we can maybe take a question or two. So Sybil said, I never thought about the type of love to be particular colors. That's so interesting. So thank you for sharing that.
Thanks, Sybil.
What was that?
Yeah, I actually know Zybel, so I just want to say hi to her.
A shout out for Sybil. Thank you. Any other questions or thoughts? So what do you think was most surprising to you in this?
Surprising with the scholarship, you mean?
Yes.
I was gonna probably say that just how, I guess, one-sided scholars can be, but also when it comes to Shakespeare criticism, there's so much, and like it's quite impossible to read everything. But it's always nice just to kind of see the like various themes that are running through it. And I just think that I found just the idea of love within his canon to be so interesting and fascinating, because a lot of the terms that are being used throughout the plays are like sickness, remedy, like just a lot of things that are pertinent toward disease. So I thought that that was something interesting to kind of explore throughout these plays. And as I go into my PhD program, I kind of want to look at it through different genres. So probably to look at it something through history and tragedy, just to kind of see, even though those tend to be a lot darker themes, to kind of look at how love plays a part there as something that is delicate, but it can also be something that can heal people too.
Yeah, I love that. I'm so excited. Congrats again and pursuing the PhD program. We have some comments. Awesome job, Christina. I never thought about whether Shakespeare was a feminist or not. So thank you for that. That came from Melody Lim, our HSS specialist. So big kudos to you. Very helpful. And we're so excited for you and your future research that you'll be conducting in the PhD program.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Connie, thank you for putting this together, and have a great rest of your week, everyone.
Perfect.
Thank you.
So Christina, I will put you back as an attendee in just a moment, and then we'll add our next presenters. 1 second. Okay, so it's 4:30 on the dot. I'm going to give our next presenter access so they can pull up their presentation and share their screen, so they now have access to that. While they're getting set up for their presentation, perfect. I see the screen sharing happening. Just a quick introduction. We have a undergraduate student in political science, Lauren Malabi, and they'll be talking about LGBT human trafficking. So whenever you're ready, it looks like your screen is fully up. We're ready for you. And as a reminder, feel free to submit those questions and comments in the Q&A box. Thanks so much. Oh, I think you might be on mute. Can you say something again? I can't hear you. I see you're unmuted. Let's see. Can you try talking one more time? Yeah, I can't hear you quite yet. You are unmuted. Let's see. Let me try putting you back as an attendee and bring you back as a panelist just to see if that works. So let's try that one time. Thank you everybody in the audience for your patience. Try that one more time. Let me add you as a co-host so you can actually be on the screen. I'm unmuting you now. Oh, I can't hear you. It's okay, it's okay. Let's see. One second. Do you mind if I see your next presenters at 4:45 are here. Maybe we switch you and maybe we could do some testing on your sound to make sure we could hear you.
Yeah, definitely. Is it working now though?
It is, yay!
Oh,
I don't know what happened.
Thank God. Someone commented to check the audio settings and now it's working.
Oh, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to whoever commented that. All right, I'm gonna share my screen and hopefully get this done. I'm so sorry about that.
No,
Hi guys, my name is Alison Malve. I'm a political science undergraduate and my research was on LGBT human trafficking and how the relationship between homelessness and homophobia fuel the selling of the LGBT community. So first off, what is human trafficking? Human trafficking is the targeting, the transportation, and the keeping of victims through means of coercion, the threat or use of violence and abuse in order to exploit said victims. The reasons for trafficking include prostitution, forced labor, modern slavery, and debt bondage. Debt bondage is when you owe money to someone, so they keep you trapped in order until you pay off that debt, and sometimes you can pay off that debt and they will still keep you trapped. For the LGBT community, the most common form of human trafficking is sex trafficking, and that is sort of an umbrella term for any kind of sex acts done that is forced and that is done for commercial use, such as pornography, prostitution, any type of sexual act done in exchange for money, food, etc., and forced participation in brothels and exotic dancing. So the LGBT community is targeted mainly because traffickers like to seek out people who are vulnerable, who lack strong support systems, and who are financially unstable and who are marginalized. And unfortunately, a lot of the struggles that LGBT people face overlap with things that traffickers look for. And traffickers are often able to lure in victims with promises of housing, protection, money, loving relationships, employment opportunities. Because as we know, a lot of the time you aren't kidnapped into human trafficking. Most of the time you're actually sort of lured into it by someone that you know and are supposed to trust. So a really big thing that fuels the LGBT human trafficking problem is the homelessness crisis. As you can see here, LGBT youth, which is people aged 13 to 17, make up 7% of the US population. However, they account for 40% of the homeless youth in the nation. That is a disgustingly disproportionate rate. The reasons for homelessness for LGBT people include aging out of the foster care system, being put into juvie or a detention center, being released from it, lack of affordable housing, familial poverty, and abuse from family members. However, a common denominator that we see in why LGBT youth are homeless is that 77% of lesbian and gay and bisexual youth and 85% of trans youth said that the reason why they are homeless is because they were either forced out of their homes or they were disowned or they had to run away due to a lack of acceptance. In the research that I was reading, they say that there's two types of LGBT youth homeless people. There's either throwaways who get kicked out of their homes and are disowned, or runaways, which is people who run away from abuse and run away from their homophobic family. So trafficking in the LGBT community, it really starts out with something called survival sex. And survival sex is sort of the gateway into full-on trafficking. Survival sex is basically when you engage in sexual acts in exchange for some kind of money and some kind of food, drugs, and homeless gay and bisexual men are far more likely to engage in survival sex in order to get their basic living needs than heterosexual homeless men. Also, on top of that, there is this hidden form of trafficking called, it's called digital sex trafficking. It's a lot more hidden. And it's basically when LGBT youth are forced into doing things online, such as phone sex, texting lines, and remote sex acts done through things like on the computer and through websites. This is really easy to hide because you're not outwardly seeing it, and it can be done in like a bedroom and no one can know about it. One of the biggest obstacles that's stopping victims from seeking help is law enforcement viewing people who are victims of human trafficking as criminals. A lot of the time, law enforcement will see victims as panhandlers, loiterers, and because there's a lot of harmful stereotypes about the LGBT community being promiscuous or being predatory, there is a lot of victim shaming that goes on. And a lot of people will say that they were looking for acceptance in the wrong places. For example, in an interview, this is a quote from an interview from Ira Baker. Ira Baker was sex trafficked at the age of 8. And he says, my biological mother hated the fact that I was gay. The only time it was okay for me to be gay was when these older men wanted to pay her to take me for the evening. It was dinner and then back to a hotel room, and that's when the sex would begin. Ira Baker grew up in an incredibly homophobic and abusive household. He was pimped out at the age of 8, and he continued to perform sex acts in order to survive up until the age of 17. He was put in prison for prostitution when he was 11. An 11-year-old should not be going to jail. An 11-year-old should be getting help that he needs. I also wanted to specifically dive into the transgender trafficking and homelessness problem. So the US Transgender Survey, they specialize in research done about trans people, found that 30% of trans people have been homeless, and that the two recurring themes that they found as to why trans people stay trafficked is that their traffickers either make them believe that they're unlovable because they are trans, or they give them false promises of paying for their hormone replacement treatment or paying for their gender reassignment surgery. And those two things are incredibly expensive. 12% of trans people have been homeless within the last year, and workplace discrimination is a really big obstacle that stops a lot of trans people from going into regular jobs. So that's why they will seek out commercial sex in order to make a living, which can be incredibly dangerous. The National Human Trafficking Hotline found that as of last year, there were 78 cases of trafficking where the victim was trans, and they believe there is way more cases because there's so much underreporting that happens and a lot of victims don't want to come forward to talk about it. And For example, this isn't just limited to the US. In Brazil in 2019, authorities in Sao Paulo found that there was a trafficking ring that specifically targeted trans women that had been active since 2013, and they would lure trans women in with promises of, again, paying for their hormone replacement therapy and paying for their gender reassignment surgery, and then forcing them into prostitution. When they cracked down on this brothel, they found that there were like 70-something women in there, but they believe that there is way more women that have been in that brothel since it had been active since 2013. The Human Rights Campaign also has reported that there's been a huge spike in hate crimes against the trans community in 2017 to 2018. And finally, another big reason why human trafficking is specifically dangerous for gay and trans people is because of trans panic and gay panic. Those are legal defenses that are done where basically if someone doesn't tell you that they're trans, you murder them because they didn't disclose that to you. And this is unfortunately only illegal in 8 states. In 40-something states, I don't know, I'm not good at math, you can pretty much use this in a court battle. You can say, I didn't know that they were gay and I was uncontrollably enraged by this. And so that kind of gives me the right to murder someone. In conclusion, I really want to emphasize that gay marriage being legalized was not the end-all be-all of gay rights. If anything, gay marriage being legalized was kind of just the honeymoon phase of gay rights and the journey in order for gay people to have more rights and for the humanity to be recognized. There's still a lot to be worked on. There's a severe shortage of LGBT homeless places for homeless youth and LGBT centers for people to go to where they will be safe and given resources. There's a lot that we need to work on in this country, and we really do need to tackle the homelessness crisis that's going on because it is fueling the trafficking crisis that's also affecting a lot of people, many people who are underage, I mean, the ages of 13 to 17. And I really want to shed light on when people say homophobia or it's just a difference of opinion or something. No, your difference of opinion can hurt people and it kills. Homophobia kills, homophobia affects people in ways that you cannot even imagine. And it fuels things like this. It fuels human trafficking and it fuels homelessness when you see that 70 to 80% of gay and trans youth are becoming homeless because of the lack of their parents' acceptance. So in conclusion, we need to do better for our children and we need to become more aware of the things that are going on in this country regarding LGBT youth because they make up 40% of our population and we definitely need to value the people in our community regardless of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Thank you. If there are any questions anyone would like to ask, feel free.
Wow, thank you so much. What a powerful presentation. Our
Thank you.
Q&A box has been becoming very filled with comments and questions for you. Just so you know, we have about 47 folks who were able to be here for your presentation. So I'm so glad the audio ended up working out. We may not be able to get to all of these questions because they're continuing to flood in, but what % of homeless LGBT youth are quote unquote throwaway versus quote unquote runaway?
We don't know the exact numbers for that, but they do estimate that over half fall into either or presentation, either or demographic. Yeah, I see. Where is Ira Baker today? Ira Baker is now working for a non-profit organization that helps LGBT youth in Florida. He is now a grown man and he's doing just fine. So it's safe to say that he's become very happy with his life and he's been able to recover. As a child development major, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you also, Melody Lim. Oh, thank you so much, Anthony, as well. Thank you.
Yeah, our Q&A box is being flooded right now, so we thank you so much. Maybe
I'll take
another question. Is human trafficking more prominent in developed or developing worlds?
It's more prominent in countries where the people who are brought into countries come from underdeveloped countries and then they're brought into developed countries. So a lot of people will come from like Russia, Eastern Europe, places in Africa, like really impoverished places, just anywhere really, and they will be brought into the US, into places like LA. LA is a huge hub for human trafficking. They'll be brought into Portland, places like that. So they go from underdeveloped countries into more developed countries where people have the money to fund things like that and to be able to purchase people, unfortunately.
Wow. Again, so many sentiments of awesome presentation, hit major points, great job.
Thank you.
Thank you for shedding light on this.
Thank you so much, Connie, for arranging this as well. I really appreciate this opportunity.
Of course. I'm looking at the time, maybe one more, because I know we started late, so I want to give you the time you deserve and earn.
Of course. Thank you so much.
The last question, when you said that those indicating that they did not know a victim was murdered, was transsexual, and they can get away with it, did you mean their charges were dropped?
Their charges weren't dropped. Their charges sometimes are dropped, but their charges sometimes they're able to fight for a lesser sentence. They're able to argue, oh, well, I didn't know and this caused me to fly into an uncontrollable rage. So I can kind of sort of get away with murdering this person because they didn't disclose that information to me. This is kind of something that happens a lot with why a lot of trans women are unfortunately killed. They'll meet someone, they'll talk to them, they won't tell them that they're trans. Most of the time it isn't even relevant to the conversation. The man will find out that it's usually men who unfortunately are the perpetrators of these murders. The man will find out that this person is trans, and then they will kill them because they feel that these women have deceived them, that they've lied to them. And if anyone is aware of what's his name, Matthew Shepard in 1998, I believe he also was murdered because he was gay, because he didn't tell people that he was gay, and that caused them to that's what the argument that they used in the courtroom in order to justify murdering him. It was a horrendous hate crime that happened back in the 90s.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that information. I mean, bringing light to it, not that it's positive by any means, but I mean, spreading that awareness. And again, last question. I really made it this time. What's the percentage of LGBT homelessness for those who are 17 plus?
I didn't really focus a lot on the more adult people, but the unfortunate thing that I found is that 40% usually stays around the same, because most LGBT youth who are homeless will unfortunately continue to be homeless after they turn 18, because escaping homelessness is a huge problem that's really, really hard to get out of, especially in places like LA where there's a lack of affordable housing. That definitely just adds fuel to the fire of why people continue to be homeless. So a lot of the people who become homeless in their teens will unfortunately stay homeless for a while after they turn 18. Hopefully we're trying to get that percentage down as much as possible though.
Right. Thank you. Again, great job. Excellent job.
Thank you so much.
Glad the audio ended up working out. Round of virtual applause for our presenter. In just a moment, I will switch you back to attendee, and then we'll get the next presenters over.
Thank you so much.
Thanks again. Congrats.
Thank you.
All right, so our next presentation, our final presentation of the day. Thanks for folks for sticking around. We do want to give our last presenters full time allocated, so we will go probably about 5 minutes over 5 o'clock, but we appreciate you sticking around and supporting. We do have a group presentation this time around. I'm going to give them access to share their screen in just a moment, so thank you for your patience. Oh, actually, can you all share who will do the share screening?
Valerie will.
Valerie, perfect. Valerie, I will add you as a co-host so you can do so. All right, Valerie, you should be able to share your screen now. And whoever is speaking will be the main screen, and the other presenters, whenever you speak, then you'll be on the main screen for the audience to see. So just a heads up on that. And we are ready. When you are, I'll do a quick introduction of you. So Maximilio Gutierrez is an undergraduate student in psychology and criminal justice. Valerie Klein, an undergraduate student in psychology and human services. Alan Guandique is an undergraduate student in psychology and human services, and they will be speaking and presenting today on sexism, gender, and perceptions of mental illness, severity, and treatment. Thank you all.
Thank you. So my name is Max, and then we do have Valerie and Alan, as previously mentioned. And let's get started. So college students are at high risk for mental illness. The typical age onset for any psychological problem is between the age of 16 to 25, where the common age for college students is 18 to 25. In mid-1980s, about 10 to 15% of college students met criteria for some type of mental health issue. This number has more than doubled by 2015 and has stayed consistent up until 2019. One of the most commonly reported problems is overwhelming stress, followed by anxiety disorders and depressive disorders. This makes sense in the fact that tuition has been increasing over the years, whereas minimum wage kind of flattened out and didn't go up as much. That means that students not only have to set time to study and work with other students on projects, but they have to have one, possibly two jobs in order to pay for tuition and living expenses, not giving them enough time to focus on themselves and their mental health. College students tend to underutilize mental health services. Regardless of the psychological problem, about 25% of students utilize some type of mental health service. When looking at depression or anxiety only, about 50% of them utilize some type of service. In 1994, about 9% of college students were on psychotropic medication. By 2019, this number has risen to about 35% of college students, meaning that 35% of students were using some type of psychotropic medication to help them cope with their psychological problems. Literature has consistently found that individuals who hold sexist beliefs are more likely to hold negative attitudes towards psychological treatments. Additionally, females are more likely to report mental health issues and hold positive attitudes toward therapy when compared to their counterpart males, who tend not to report mental health issues and hold negative attitudes toward therapy.
So based on previous research that we found, we ran 4 different hypotheses for our study. The first one was that participants who scored higher versus lower in sexist attitudes would be less likely to view the mental illness we portrayed in a vignette as serious. The second one was that participants who scored higher versus lower in sexist attitudes would also be less likely to recommend treatment. Our third was that male participants versus female participants would be less likely to view the mental illness portrayed as serious. And our fourth and final hypothesis was that male versus female participants would also be less likely to recommend treatment. Our participants consisted of 536 college students, of which 420 were female and 112 were male. Our ethnic status breakdown is that 255 participants identified as Latinx, 148 identified as Asian, 86 identified as white, 17 identified as African American, 19 identified as other, 10 identified as Arab American, and 1 identified as American Indian. For our materials section, we had a 14-item demographics section. We also had participants take the old-fashioned and modern sexism scale, where answers range strongly to strongly agree. An example item would be discrimination against women is no longer a problem in the United States. We also had participants answer vignette response items to gauge their perceived significance of mental illness and their treatment recommendations for the vignette. So our first vignette depicted Sophia with schizophrenia. Some of the symptoms she portrayed was that she was convinced people were spying on her, that they could hear what she was doing. She had auditory hallucinations and began skipping meals and stopped bathing regularly, and this persisted for 6 months. Our second hypothesis depicted Michael with bipolar 1 disorder, and some of the symptoms he exhibited were that he had no need to sleep. He was very racing in his thoughts and elated in his physical behavior. He became angry if challenged and was also spending money recklessly and believed that the government was paying for it. Our procedure section was approved by the Institutional Review Board, and participants completed and viewed the self-report questionnaires through Qualtrics. And all the analyses were conducted through SPSS version 26.
So as Valerie previously mentioned, our first hypothesis, which was those higher versus lower in sexist attitudes would be less likely to view the mental illness depicted as serious, was partially supported in the sense that those higher in sexism were more likely to rate Sophia's condition, the condition depicting schizophrenia, as less serious. You can see this on the graph on the right, with those high in sexism having lower severity ratings than those low in sexism. And although not significantly different between the two groups, those higher in sexism did have a lower severity rating compared to those low in sexism when referring to Michael's condition depicting bipolar 1 disorder. Our second hypothesis, those higher versus lower in sexist attitudes would be less likely to recommend treatment, was fully supported, with those high in sexism being less likely to endorse professional treatment for Sophia's condition as well as for Michael's condition. Our third hypothesis, male versus female participants would be less likely to view mental illness as serious, was again partially supported, with males more likely to view Sophia's condition as less serious. You can see this again in the graph on the right, with males having a lower severity rating than females. And although not significantly different, again, males did have less severity rating than females when referring to Michael's condition. Our fourth hypothesis, male versus female participants would be less likely to recommend treatment, was partially supported, with males being less likely to recommend professional treatment for Sophia's condition. Again, can be seen on the right as well, with males having a lower treatment recommendation than females. And although not significantly different between males and females, males were less likely to recommend professional treatment for Michael's condition as well when compared to females.
So consistent with previous literature, we did find that those individuals who had high sexist beliefs were least likely to endorse treatment for both conditions and viewed Sophia's mental illness as less serious, meaning that participants may have been minimizing the significant psychological symptoms displayed in the vignette, given that the vignette protagonist was a female. Additionally, male participants also viewed Sophia's mental illness as less serious and also were least likely to endorse treatment for Sophia. As Alan previously mentioned, although not significant for Michael, it was in the expected direction, meaning that overall participants may have viewed the vignettes as typical female-male behavior. For example, Michael was becoming impatient, distracted, and becoming very angry when challenged, whereas Sophia thought people were making disapproving comments and talking behind her back. Some potential limitations include gender bias, where we only had Sophia for schizophrenia and Michael for bipolar. We also had an unequal male and female sample size, and our Latinx individuals made up almost half of our sample size. The length of the survey took an average about 45 minutes for a participant to complete the survey, where research has shown that after 15 minutes on a survey, the responses began to decrease in accuracy. Therefore, future research could shorten the length of the survey to kind of get more accurate responses, use gender neutral language to reduce some of the gender biases that could be found. And it would be interesting to look at how cultural values may influence a participant's treatment recommendation and endorsement. For example, because our sample consisted of a lot of Latinx individuals, there is this concept called machismo, which may potentially hinder an individual from seeking treatments or recommending treatments. So it would be interesting to look at this relationship. Thank you guys so much for listening. Do we have any questions?
Thank you all. And thank you for continuing to bring awareness to this important topic. Mental health is, as you mentioned, is really prevalent in the nation, especially among college students. So thank you for continuing to research this topic. As a reminder, please feel free to send your questions and comments to the Q&A box. We do have a question that has come through. It's from Sean, and the question reads, is the cause for an increase in mental health issues from the 80s compared to the 2000s due to greater awareness of mental health issues, or is it due to other factors?
Yeah, so I think this could be related to like multiple factors. There are many things that affect mental health. It could be both financial and increase, like I mentioned, from like tuition, as well as people becoming more aware about what's going on. And there has been an increase in communication about mental health issues. Like New York actually, I think, moved a system that they have to teach about mental health from kindergarten to 12th grade. So I think it's a combination of both, not just one.
Thank you. And then a comment has come in from Melody. Thank you for bringing more awareness to this topic. Max, Valerie, and Alan, super important. So yes, definitely.
Thank you.
And then do any of you want to add anything as we wrap up your presentation, takeaways, things you want the audience to remember about your presentation? Feel free to do so now.
No, sorry.
All right, cool, no worries. So I want to make sure you have, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. I appreciate your coordination in this. You were our only group presentation at the symposium, and I know that's not always easy to do a group presentation in this Zoom webinar format. So I appreciate you all coordinating this really effectively. So I will soon release you back into the audience. But I'm going to make a few announcements as we wrap up our time. I know it's a few minutes after 5. So I want to thank everyone who was able to attend today. I mean, today continues to remind me of the importance and the value of HSS majors and the research they conduct. Definitely want to give a shout out to our HSS Dean's Office for helping coordinate and plan this event, also our Student Success Center, to make sure that even though we are social distancing, or I like to say physical distancing, we can still provide these opportunities for you all to highlight the important research that you're conducting. So thank you all so much. I'm so, again, happy we were able to do this, and I hope you all have a fantastic day and get some good rest and stay well and stay healthy, all right? Thank you all. Goodbye.